further proof. Planned Parenthood top executives caught on camera discussing parts of aborted babies bringing in cash. Washed away. At least 8 women and children caught in a flash flood in Utah are swept to their deaths. A clearer picture. New details emerge about the Pope's U.S. visit and his Mass at the National Shrine. And anticipating his message, some members of Congress hope Francis will tackle tough issues on Capitol Hill. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Tuesday, September 15th, 2015. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. A new undercover video provides still more evidence Planned Parenthood sells specific parts of aborted babies. Today, the Center for Medical Progress released its 10th video. It includes Planned Parenthood executives saying they sell the heart, eyes, and even gonads of unborn babies. One executive calls the selling of body parts a valid exchange.
We have independent colleagues who generate a fair amount of income doing this, and if they have smaller
at the independent
don't
clinics,
have the ability to fundraise because they're not a nonprofit.
The woman in that video is the national director for the Consortium of Abortion Providers. She goes on to say they worry about potential headlines if the information were to be released to the public. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. We're learning tonight more about the papal Mass here in Washington next week. The first reading at the massive canonization for Blessed Junipero Serra will be in Native American. The petitions include prayers for an end to abortion, euthanasia, and the death penalty. Our Rome correspondent Alan Holdren has some new information on the Pope's trip tonight. Alan, what have you learned about the papal speeches while he's in the U.S.?
Well, Brian, we had a briefing with the Vatican spokesman, Father Lombardi, this morning. He said that there will be 18 total speeches in the United States. Just 4 of those will be in English, Brian, which is important to note. One of those is at Congress. Another will be at the White House during the welcoming ceremony. Another will be to the staff of the United Nations. We do know also that his speech to the United Nations will be in Spanish.
Alan, you'll be traveling first on the papal plane to Cuba with the Holy Father. Will he be meeting Fidel Castro?
That's what we heard today. This is the first official mention of the Pope planning to meet with Fidel Castro. The Vatican and the Cuban government are still talking out the details as to when exactly that could happen, but it will be in Havana if it takes place, which is the first day and a half of the Pope's trip.
Does he have any plan to talk with political prisoners or dissidents there?
Father Lombardi said this morning that he doesn't have any specific plans. Unless something came up spontaneously, it probably won't take place. He will be meeting with inmates at a prison when he's in the United States, so that will give him an opportunity to speak to this specific issue, while perhaps not specifically to the dissidents there in Cuba.
And that meeting with inmates is in the Philadelphia area. So on the relatively short flight from Cuba to the U.S. to Washington, will he have a news conference as he often does?
That's what Father Lombardi said this morning. He said if the Pope agrees to the news conference, there will be plenty of time. It's a 3.5-hour flight from Santiago, Cuba, to Washington, D.C.
So he apparently would like to address some of the issues from Cuba before getting wrapped up in our U.S. visit.
That's right, Brian. Usually after he leaves the country, the issues kind of get covered up by the next country he goes to. As this is a multinational trip, he wants to make sure to give Cuba its due before moving on to the United States.
Alan, we are praying for safety for you, the Holy Father, and everyone traveling. We appreciate you. Alan Holdren in Rome. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brian.
And our Susie Pinto and Paul Fifield are already in Cuba and will bring us reports in the next few days. Pope Francis makes history next week as the first pope to speak to the U.S. Congress. Jason Calvi reports from the Capitol on issues that some members hope the Pope will address.
Brian, even the Vatican spokesman says he doesn't know exactly what the Holy Father will say when he addresses Congress next week. But members of Congress say they have high hopes.
Being Christ's vicar on earth, I am very excited about having him here.
California Representative Juan Vargas met the Holy Father last year. While Vargas has a 100% rating with NARAL Pro-Choice America, he says he's not worried if the Pope speaks about abortion. And Representative Chris Smith of New Jersey says the Pope should be firm.
He's not coming here to be liked. He's bearing witness to
truths that need to be articulated. My earnest hope and prayer is that Pope Francis will very forthrightly speak to the culture of life, of protecting unborn children, to recognize that in the United States, 58 million babies have been killed by abortion.
Other members of Congress want guidance for the country, including on topics like the persecution of Middle Eastern Christians.
How the United States and the world community needs to step up and acknowledge what's occurring, and that it is a form of genocide.
In so many ways, I think people in this country are not doing what you'd say is God's law compared to 40 years ago, and hopefully the Pope will address that.
I hope that he keeps bringing the message of mercy and of God's love. I think he can be very helpful here in helping us really reach across the aisle, work with each other.
The Vatican spokesman says the Pope's address here at the Capitol next week will be the chance for the Holy Father to speak directly to all Americans, not just Catholics. We'll have team coverage both inside and outside the Capitol during that historic speech. Brian?
Jason Calvi at the U.S. Capitol. Thank you, Jason. And refugees are stuck at the Hungary-Serbia border with no solution to Europe's refugee crisis in sight. Nearly all crossings at the border have been closed, secured with razor wire fencing. Anyone trying to break through the fences face up to 3 years in prison. Hungary now plans to extend that barrier along the Romanian border. North Korea warns it's ready to use nuclear weapons on the U.S. and other nations that remain hostile toward the North Korean regime. Pyongyang has issued similar threats in the past. Experts doubt North Korea has the missile technology to target the U.S. mainland. The latest threat comes as North Korea plans more satellite launches, defying a UN Security Council ban. The launches may be North Korea's way of testing its missiles. The U.S. raises new alarms about Russian military activity in Syria. The Pentagon says these satellite images suggest Russia is trying to establish a forward operating base in western Syria. The images were taken earlier this month by a geopolitical intelligence and advisory firm. The U.S. says they show early construction of a base that may be used to assist Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in his ongoing civil war. A lawyer for the Kentucky clerk jailed for refusing to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples thinks there may now be a solution. Attorney Harry Mihet says licenses now being issued without Kim Davis's name or authority do not violate her conscience. The phrase, "pursuant to a federal court order," replaces her signature on the licenses. Kentucky's governor says those licenses are recognized as valid. Davis returned to work this week after serving 5 days in jail for contempt. Round 2 of the Republican presidential debates is just a day away now. The GOP candidates gather tomorrow at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Library in Simi Valley, California. Suzanne LaFranchi is here with more.
Brian, there is a lot at stake tomorrow night. The top 11 candidates will square off. Pundits expect leader Donald Trump to take on heavy fire from his opponents. Now there are other political forces taking aim at Trump. 20,000 supporters cheered Trump at a rally in Dallas last night. The frontrunner continues to shrug off mounting attacks from his rivals.
I hear they're all going after me. Whatever.
Trump wants us to think he's Mr. Tell It Like It Is, but he has a record, and it's very liberal. He's really just playing us for chumps.
Now an onslaught from a Washington-based conservative advocacy group. The Club for Growth is spending $1 million on TV ads. They start airing tomorrow in the early primary voting state of Iowa.
He would not make America great again. It would be a disaster. He's for things that help Donald Trump. So he doesn't want to tax himself, but he'll tax other people.
The ads claim Trump is really a liberal Democrat, the most progressive candidate on the economy, even rivaling Bernie Sanders. The ads challenge Trump's positions on taxes, trade, health care, and support of eminent domain, the government seizing of private property for corporate use.
The polls come out, and we're really killing it. We are killing it.
But a new poll reveals Ben Carson is closing in on Trump. The billionaire remains the lead among GOP candidates at 27%, but the retired neurosurgeon is closing the gap at 23%. Carly Fiorina, who will be on tomorrow night's debate stage, also continues to swipe at Trump.
Donald Trump is an entertainer, and I think I am a leader.
Trump is showing signs that he's aware of the growing target on his back. Before the debate, he is expected to delve into other issues like national security and veterans affairs. Next comes a plan on reducing taxes. Brian?
Susanne LaFranchi, thank you. John Brabender, senior advisor to Rick Santorum's presidential campaign, joining us. And John, what's different about this week's CNN debate than the previous Republican debate?
Well, I think there's two major differences. One is there's even more people on stage, and so that makes it tougher for every candidate. And actually, I would argue, too, with Carly Fiorina being on the stage, the only woman with 10 men up there, that does change the tone and sort of the dynamics of the debate, I believe, and makes it, in some ways, complicated.
But with 11 people on that stage, how does anyone, especially someone who might be a little more reserved, get any kind of attention?
Well, the strategy changes. It used to be that you would do these long debate preparations so that you could answer these extensive questions. Now it's going to be more about how can I get attention with a one-liner or attacking a right opponent or whatever. So it's a completely different strategy.
So Perry's now out. When do you expect any others to drop out?
I think that most of them are funded enough that they're fine, at least through Iowa. I don't think there'll be a major change. I mean, Perry was unique in that he could no longer pay staff. He was down to 0 in Iowa, 0 in South Carolina. You just can't run a campaign like that. I don't see any major changes in the coming weeks.
Other than funding, for a guy like you who is advising the candidate, what do you look for in making that decision of let's hang in there or time to get out?
Well, you look back. If you look at 2008 and you look at 2012, the people that were leading at this point in the campaigns did not become the nominee. John McCain looked like he was totally out of the campaign and was one guy with a suitcase and no help, ends up getting the nomination in 2008. Mitt Romney eventually went on, but you take somebody like Rick Santorum, who won 11 out of the 30 primaries. At this point, he wasn't even registering in the polls. And so I think what you do is you remind them that there's a lot of fluidity and to be patient and just be the best candidate you can be.
How does a large field work for the party at this point? Is it divisive or is it a positive in that there seems to be more attention focused on Republicans?
Well, it depends if the candidates basically do what they're supposed to do and behave themselves.
And they not always do.
No, when it's a lot of personal attacks, it's divisive to the party and it makes the party look good. But to me, it could be that we could showcase that we have an incredible amount of talent on the Republican side. And so if they're all putting together good ideas and sound ideas instead of just trying to do negative sound bites, I think it helps the party. But there's always somebody behind or way behind, and in this case, there's a number of people way behind and 1 or 2 people way ahead. And so, you know, in politics, the best way sometimes to change that is to go after those people.
John Brabender, political advisor, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, always happy to be here.
Coming up, a Vatican expert discusses leadership qualities of Pope Francis that make his pontificate unique. And flash floods take a Utah town off guard, leaving women and children dead. Today, September 15th, is the Memorial of Our Lady of Sorrows. Traditionally, 7 Hail Marys are recited daily during the month of September in devotion to the 7 sorrows of Mary. Thank you for joining us this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. A week from today, Pope Francis arrives here in Washington on the first leg of his U.S. apostolic journey. Wyatt Goolsbee recently talked with a Vatican expert about the Holy Father's unique leadership style.
John Thavis, Vatican journalist and author, joins us now. You know, you've covered the papacies of both John Paul II and Benedict XVI. From a leadership standpoint, compare and contrast the two. How is Pope Francis different?
Pope Francis combines the leadership qualities, I think, of a CEO in some ways and a pastor. Okay. You know, the public knows him as a pastor because he is so down to earth, so direct in his language and communication, and so caring about people. He's a people person. But he's also an executive. And by that I mean that to date, Pope Francis has shown a great ability to bring people around, consult with people, including other bishops and cardinals and even Vatican officials, and then make his own decision. And we have seen this time after time. He issues what is called a motu proprio, which means in Latin, on one's own initiative. And these are the equivalent at the Vatican of the executive order. He has used this, for example, recently to change the annulment procedures. Mm-hmm. He has used this to set up tribunals, to set up brand new Vatican agencies that have great powers. So he listens, he waits, and then he makes a decision. And when that decision comes down, there are people who say, wow, he did that in a relatively short time.
You have a new book out, obviously we're talking to you about today, The Vatican Prophecies. Give us a brief overview of that.
The Vatican Prophecies is about investigating supernatural signs, apparitions, and miracles in the modern age. And I wrote it because I think this is an area of Catholicism that a lot of people don't really know very well. You know, for 30 years, I saw the Vatican kind of wrestling with a lot of these issues. You know, which apparitions are real, are worthy of respect? What miracles can be validated, which ones cannot? To what extent is exorcism a real ministry in the modern day and age? And it's a serious issue, and yet it's one that is often treated with a kind of flippancy in the mainstream media. So I wanted to write a serious book about how the Vatican goes about investigating these things and how it really balances what we have in the church, which is a church of reason and a church of miracles.
And certainly they're topics that people are interested in, certainly, but it's nice to have someone specify the difference between Hollywood perspective on that and actually what the church teaches.
That's exactly right. And I find more and more that what the Vatican wants to do is move away from the Hollywood and theatrical and spectacular aspects of miracles and promote a wider understanding of miracles, because, you know, miracles probably happen every day. We just don't see them. And I think the Vatican wants people to be aware of that and perhaps to notice them more.
John Thavis, Vatican journalist and author, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Wyatt. And later this week, we'll have more on that interview with John Thavis discussing the themes he anticipates Pope Francis will touch on during his U.S. visit. 4 more American church leaders will now participate in October's Synod on the Family in Rome. The Holy Father has appointed New York Cardinal Timothy Dolan, Washington Cardinal Donald Wuerl, Chicago Archbishop Blaise Cupich, and Youngstown, Ohio Bishop George Murray to the Synod. They join 4 other bishops already chosen by the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. More than 200 bishops from around the world will participate in the Synod. Tonight, we pray especially for the people in the small community of Hilldale, Utah. Flash flooding there leaves 8 dead and even more missing.
This is the front yard.
Dramatic video shows a massive and deadly flash flood ripping through a small town on the Arizona-Utah state line. You hear screams from those shocked by the rushing water.
What's happening right now?
Heavy rain fell in the mountains above the canyon town earlier in the day, causing the river to rise rapidly, catching people off guard.
Whoa, it's starting to slide.
Rescue crews raced to save a family from a car moments from being swept away.
Yeah, they're getting everybody out.
Children are pulled quickly from the car windows.
He's starting to build a heck of a dam.
The flood is so strong the current pileup uproots trees at its path.
That's pretty powerful.
A search is still underway tonight for several people, after 2 vehicles carrying a total of 16 parked to watch the flood were swept away by the intense rush of water. At least 8 people have been found dead, all of the victims mothers and small children, the youngest just 4 years old.
There's still active floodwaters and very dangerous, very treacherous. The banks are caving off. More significant flood than we've had for quite some time.
Hilldale is largely a community of fundamentalist Mormons who are polygamists. Up next, a local bishop overrules the Vatican in declaring the legitimacy of a Marian apparition. And 3 young Maryland Catholic school students are surprised with tickets to the canonization mass in D.C. Jesus said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." And then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." From today's Gospel according to St. John, one of the 7 sorrows of Mary. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Pope Francis says Mother Church must have a loving and tender maternal feeling and human warmth.
Pensare la Chiesa senza questa maternalità.
The Pope's saying to think of the Church without that motherly feeling is to think of a rigid association with no human warmth, he says. All that remains is rigidity and discipline. The Pope's homily at today's Mass for Our Lady of Sorrows was based on Jesus speaking with his mother at the foot of the cross from John's Gospel. The Archbishop of Lipa calls a Marian apparition in the Philippines worthy of belief. During feast day celebrations for Our Lady, Mediatrix of All Grace, last weekend, Bishop Raymond Arguelles releases an official statement of approval. The Archbishop says the events and apparition of 1948, also known as the Marian phenomenon in Lipa and its aftermath, even in recent times, do exhibit supernatural character and is worthy of belief. Marian expert Michael O'Neill, creator of MiracleHunter.com, Skyping with us from Chicago. Michael, this is the first time in history that an archbishop has overturned a Vatican judgment from negative to positive. Pretty bold move. What's behind that?
Well, I think really it boils down to the great Marian devotion of this particular archbishop and the people of the Philippines. This would go in the category of the sensus fidelium, the sense of the people there have honored Our Lady under that title, and the bishop is showing that with this approval.
How interesting. Summarize the apparition at Lipa for us.
So the apparition happened in the year 1948 to a Carmelite novice named Teresita Castillo, and she's known as Teresing affectionately by the people there. And basically what happened is she received apparitions of Our Lady, and they were a call to a prayer to penance and to honoring Our Lady. So this was really similar to Fatima in some ways.
Now, you have investigated the site in the Philippines. Describe your findings.
Well, I was able to go there in June 2015, just a few months ago, and that was just on the heels of the Archbishop giving a homily there where he actually declared these apparitions to be supernatural. In that homily, of course, it required a more serious formal statement for it to be official. But when I went to the site there at Lipa, it was very quiet. There weren't many people there, but they have a church with an image of Our Lady. They have an apparition site if you go upstairs, and they have a small gift shop. And all this church is connected to a convent, a Carmelite convent there. So very quiet from what I'm seeing, but if you look at the videos that are now posted online, this place is buzzing with people. There's a great amount of excitement for this apparition at Lipa.
Well, we appreciate the insight from Michael O'Neill, the co-founder, or I should say founder and creator of MiracleHunter.com, joining us from Chicago. Michael, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And in a little more than a week, a limited number of people get to witness Pope Francis canonizing Blessed Junipero Serra in Washington, D.C. 3 young students are thrilled to learn in a unique way today that they'll be at that Mass. Catherine Zeltner has their story.
Pope Francis looks different through the eyes of a child.
They know who he is. They know he has a relationship with them.
D.C. area parishes like St. Bernadette's must decide how they'll distribute their share of tickets to see Pope Francis next week. The pastor of St. Bernadette's didn't want to hand out his tickets via a lottery, so he asked his parishioners to write in letters showing why they like to go to the canonization Mass, including letters from children.
Good morning, everybody. Well, I'm here to come to give one of those tickets to one person in this class who wrote a great letter asking to go to the Mass. And that ticket is for Addison Riskowski. Come over here, Addison. Here you go.
Second grader Addison's letter was straight to the point.
Dear Monsignor Smith, I would like a ticket for the Mass because I really want to see Pope Francis. He is the leader of all the Catholic Church.
The ticket surprises continue down the hall.
Brendan.
When 4th grader Brendan was at a loss for words, his classmates spoke for him.
How would you feel if you were the person to receive what Brendan's receiving right now? Yes. How would you feel? Have you ever gotten something so special in your life? Is it like a once in a lifetime opportunity?
7th grader Catalina will go from front row in religion to a coveted canonization Mass seat. Her bilingual skills are sure to come in handy for the Spanish ceremony.
Yo estoy súper emocionada a ver el Papa Francisco.
3 students who will get a close-up lesson on Catholic history in the making. Reporting from the classroom, Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine, and thanks for joining us. Be sure to be back with us tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow morning on Morning Glory on EWTN Radio. Good night.